Welcome everyone to the 12th episode of the Science and Healthcare Sustainability Podcast. We're absolutely delighted to have two guests today, which is our first episode with two guests. All the way again from America. Seems to be a huge amount of drive and interest in the United States for sustainability within labs. So very privileged to have both Katherine and Dulek from Grenova today. Alex, if you can hit us with the first question.
Thank you for joining us, guys. Much appreciated. First question, which is the same every single time, quite broad brush. What is sustainability to you?
For me, sustainability is a responsibility. We have this earth, we're on it, we're using it, and we have to find ways to advance our lives, but do it in a way that's responsible. And I just don't think sustainability is optional. I think it's a responsibility as being a human being.
To me personally, sustainability is small compounding changes that can make a significant impact for the future generations. As a father, like Katie said, we think it's a responsibility to leave this planet in a way that my kids can grow up and experience the same earth that I grew up with. So I think it's really important to focus on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a common theme with all our guests, particularly those with children who are thinking about future generations. I've been on your website and there's some fantastic facts on there. I mean, they're not fantastic in the fact that they're quite daunting actually when you read them. Can you give us an idea of what you think the scale of the problem is in laboratories?
Yeah, I mean, Dulek worked in a lab setting, so he can kind of give an up close and personal. I've actually never worked in the lab setting. I've actually worked in the OR, and I do want to kind of tell you about how my experience in the OR has brought me here. But I'll put a pin in that for now. But the problem is absolutely massive. We've heard some statistics that scientists produce about 15 times more plastic than the average human being just by nature of what they're doing every day. And life science produces it's a recordable percentage of the plastic waste being produced in the world. And it's not like flimsy plastic, it's extremely high quality plastics. I think the statistics is life science produces about 2% of the world global plastic. And that's huge when you think about all the industries producing plastic for consumers.
For me, I've been in automation and generated a ton of plastics in my career. Right, so I've walked into labs. I've been a lab scientist for a long time, automation implementer, and now I design and sell automation as well. But there's always visuals of giant waste bins full of plastic tips, right, that were used one time, sometimes just a pipette water. And it's a core memory of mine walking into a lab where one's overflowing and you have to pick up these tips, and it's just this huge problem. And every lab you walk into has these giant bins of tips and plastic plates and plastic waste, whether it's gloves or other plastic single-use products. That just creates this huge problem.
And you know what I think is really interesting about the lab in general? You know, as humans advance, whether it be health, our food systems, obviously medicine, research, healthcare, all of that is going to go through the lab. I mean, the color that created the dyes in my shirt went through the lab. So anything that we do as human beings to improve our life is going to necessitate plastics being generated. And we're going to have 9 billion people on this planet by 2050. I mean, I still remember going, in high school, there were 6 billion people on Earth. I think there's 8 now, and there's going to be 9. I mean, it's crazy. And to support all those people and advance their life science is just going to have to just keep cranking. And we've got to stop as life science grows, all this plastics grows. We have to intersect and do something different. That's what we're trying to do, because everybody on this planet, whatever country you're on, you want the life science industry to be rolling because your life's getting better as a result. But we've got to fix the plastics, and I actually think we're at a place right now where everybody sees that now, and I think there's a lot of people working on the solution.
I think you're absolutely right. It's only going to get worse. But I mean, it's a really good point as well. Let's not forget, science is going to grow with that population growth, but good things are going to come out of the science. You know, it's not all bad, but it's just a necessary evil of sort of the plastic is going to go up as well. And great that companies like yourselves are trying to do something about it now. to stop that sort of exponential growth.
So tell us a little bit about what it is that Grenova do and where you do it.
It's very basic. We allow labs to reuse their plastics, and we've been doing this for 10 years, washing and allowing labs to reuse pipette tips. About a year ago, we launched our plate washer, and so we are getting into plates now. That's what we do. We're trying to return this pipette into a material that can be reused and kind of shift the mindset away from this is a piece of trash, it's dirty, to this is a reusable vessel that we can use to do science again and again and again. So we're trying to change the mindset, but practically we're providing technology to these labs, and we're doing it benchtop, and we're doing it in an automated style to allow them to add a workflow to get these things washed and reused into their assays. My role, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Grenova. I've been here about 2 years. I wanted to just anecdotally, I come from the operating room environment. And one of the reasons I wanted to come to Grenova is because back in 2009, I was actually selling in healthcare. And I was working for a large corporation that purchased, I actually saw it on my phone, they purchased a reprocessing company. So these companies collected these high quality plastic medical devices into bins in the operating room, picked them up, washed them, re-sterilized them, and sold them back into the healthcare setting. I was working for the manufacturer who was fighting this change because, that was our product. And the company bought it. And obviously the people buying companies at huge organizations, they can see the future. And what they saw is again, like I was talking about that intersection, their needs as we come up with advancements to seal vessels and resect livers, that's just going to be more and more and more plastics. And so this idea of reprocessing in the medical device industry, I would say in the 2000s, it was like kind of like what? No way, we're not going to reuse that on a patient. But a company like Grenova, decided to take that challenge on. And today I believe that industry is about $3 billion. And I lived through the change of watching hospital systems adopt reprocessing technology. And it's a massive industry, and it saves the hospitals a ton of money to do better healthcare, buy more sophisticated machines. And, people have gotten used to the idea because they're not compromising the case. They're getting a good outcome for the patient, and they're able to keep these products in in a circular type economy. So that's my background. So when I heard about this opportunity with Grenova and started to understand the scale of the life science industry, and we've got a lot of low-hanging fruit there. Derek mentioned, water or reagents. I mean, there's some stuff that's just like, obviously we should reuse that if there was a way to do it. And so that's really what motivated me coming in here, is watching this change happen in a different industry and knowing it was possible. I think, scientists they're very high, hurdle of belief. And so the first 10 years of our company has really been working through the science and producing the validation data to prove that we can do this. I think we're past that now. We have a ton of papers, we have a ton of customers, and we can wash these tips. Now the question is, how do we make it easy? And that's sort of where we are in our company journey, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, our automation journey today. But so that's what I do. Derek, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing here?
Sure. Again, I am from La Crosse, Wisconsin. I've been a bench scientist. I've been an automation user, a programmer, and I designed and sell automation systems for about the last 10 years. I started off in a hospital lab. I'm a med tech by training, so I worked in toxicology at Mayo Clinic. I then moved on to Hamilton Robotics, programming liquid handlers for 10 years, again generating a ton of plastics, and this is where we saw a lot of high throughput applications, specifically those waste bins filled with pipette tips and plates. Then I went and focused on more larger integrations at Biosero, building high throughput systems for pharma, again using liquid handlers and other technology, using a ton of plastics. right, and generating a ton of waste. Most recently, I came over to Grenova about 9 months ago at this point, and I'm currently the territory account manager in the U.S., covering the western half of the U.S., but I also have a role as our automation specialist, and largely what that part of my role is focused on is making tip washing easy, right? Implementing automation solutions around washing tips and making it easier for the bench scientists or for the different facilities to implement tip washing programs.
Yeah, that's makes sense, both. I spent 17 years selling tips and plates, and I have a little bit of guilt for that. Derek, do you have a bit of shared guilt there? You feel like you're part of the problem for a while?
I always say, I personally have probably contributed millions and millions of tips, and some of them were never even used, right? Because we pulled them in for a factory acceptance or a site acceptance where we're running water, but those tips never got used, and we generate hundreds and hundreds of plates and hundreds of tips per every system that we did. And it was just senseless waste of plastics, is the best way I can put it. But
in fairness to you, there was no Grenova at that point. There's no alternative really. That's just what was done in the market. And also you've got to think of the science that came out of that work. I appreciate there's a lot of waste along the way. And had we known what we know now, maybe it would have been done a bit better. But it's good that we can draw a line in the sand now and say, okay, that's what we did. This is what we need to do moving forward. And if you could just tell us about how your systems work, maybe that'll give people the confidence to look into it. So I don't know if either of you could do that to tell us how does the physical action actually work in terms of washing the tips, and what grade do they come out, and what kind of assurances can you give scientists that they can use a clean tip without buying a new tip?
So Grenova technology largely uses basically 5 different technologies. We use high pressure purges using a manifold technology that comes down on the top of the tips and uses reagents or water and flushes from the top to the bottom. We use UVC light throughout the wash cycle, targeting those infectious disease, RNA and DNA proteins. We use a combination of soaking and sonication. Right? So we fill up the basin and soak the inside and outside of the tips, and then apply sonication to help dislodge or clean those tips. And then we use mechanical tip agitation, which is largely, mechanically removing liquids and debris from the tip as well. Now, what I think the secret sauce is kind of the combination of all of them, right? So it's not one solution. So tip washing isn't new. It's been around forever, right? So you look at your diagnostic instrumentation like in a healthcare lab, like the Beckmans and other systems like that, they're washing probes, and they're doing it between hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples, right? But because it's metal and it's been validated, they just kind of accept it and do it. There's just something different about the plastic and the mind shift with that, that I think largely we have data supporting that we can wash, and what we like to say is they're like new tips. And our customers have written papers, publications, we have posters that we can share in different industries, but largely what we do is tailor our wash protocols to wash your tip for your application, so we can prove that it works.
Is there a limit to how many times these tips can be washed and reused?
So where we see the degradation on the tip is actually from the plastic itself. So depending on the tip, we see reuse averaging from 10 for your manual applications up to 20, 25, even one customer up to about 75. So depending on the quality and the attachment method on how you pick up that tip, it can vary greatly. So your Hamilton liquid handlers that use core technology, nothing in that plastic changes, right? It's high quality plastic. They use an O-ring to pick up those tips. I have no issue seeing 20 plus reuses on those. Some of the handheld pipettes are where the collar breaks down, right? So as you attach it manually, so Derek's feeling very strong today, I'm going to really hammer that home on the bench, whereas somebody else might not use the same amount of force or do it differently. Those tend to see about 5 to 10 reuses.
Okay, very good.
So in automation, I guess that's where you see the real payback, where people are using lots and lots of very costly tips that can be reused 20, 30 times, as you say. But there must be still a place for the average lab bench where they're using manual pipette tips as well. Do you have an instrument that fits each of those? Is it kind of a graded thing?
Derek, you're doing a great job. Keep going.
All right. So we kind of break our systems out into 3 different platforms, right? So we have the Tip Novus Mini, which does one rack of tips in the washer and one at the dryer at the same time. That's meant for our academic labs, smaller throughputs. Maybe they're running very expensive specialized tips. Then we have our Tip Novus platform, which is our flagship. That's going to do 4 racks at a time in both the washer and the dryer. And then we can scale that with automation, right, where you can start talking hundreds of racks per day to fit like a central wash facility or a large high throughput operation.
Oh. Is there any big pharmaceutical or biotech companies that are using your system that you can talk about? I know some people may not like you talking about it, but is there anyone using it that would give our listeners reassurance that, okay, the big boys are using this, it's a serious bit of kit?
That's always the tricky thing here for us, is that we do. The answer is yes, we do have large-scale pharmaceutical companies using our technology. I will say we had a huge milestone recently. One of our Fortune 500 companies just published our sustainability impact data in their annual sustainability report this year. So still working with them on how we can talk about it or not talk about it. So check back on LinkedIn. But so yes, we have a lot of large pharmaceutical companies. We've done some talks with Novartis recently at Future Lab in Basel. Berlinger Ingelheim actually also did a talk at the same conference. And so we're starting to see people being willing to talk about it, because the drive for sustainability is becoming greater than all the nervousness surrounding single use and we can't take any risk and I hate even to use that word risk, because we're not taking risks. We're very meticulously working through the validation process with our customers. And at the end of the day, it's about the results. And so our validation process is very much around, let's do this test with a brand new tip. Let's wash it and let's get the results. Let's wash it. Let's do the test again and let's compare the results. That's how most of our validation processes go. And so we're like Derek was mentioning with the metal probes. I mean, we're just working through that with our customers, and the results are undeniable. There's no change to the results. And so people are getting more and more comfortable. And so now we can kind of, and this is what I meant about like 10 years of proving that it works and getting some, early customers. Like NIH actually is a fantastic customer that's done a ton of speaking on our behalf. And early on, they were an early adopter customer. There's a lot of people working there that really care about sustainability, and they were willing to help us generate data early on. So we've just been building and building and building and building. And I feel like now we're to the point where, can we wash it? Very confident in that. Now it's the ease part. And then now it's like, okay, so what are my metrics? I think one of you mentioned it earlier. It's like not good enough to just say, oh, we're doing sustainability. It's like, what are you doing? So we've recently invested in a sustainability calculator. We went to a conference at the end of October 2023, and we just heard, it was an ESG focused conference in the pharmaceutical industry, and we just heard people, mostly in Europe, mostly coming from Europe, but a little bit in the United States, especially in California, just really needing data to report on and standardized data to report on. And so Grenova in 2024 invested with in a calculator. So we actually hired Row Impact, a fantastic company that does climate impact forecasting. What they'll do is they'll say, okay, if this technology takes a foothold, what will the climate impact be at 2% market share, 3% market share? So we really liked their model, because we were like, that's us. We want to know if these labs do decide to adopt this technology, like what's the future impact? Because, resources are constrained. There's, they're making decisions about what to focus on every day. And obviously washing tips isn't necessarily revenue generating. So we needed a way to communicate why you should care about this. So what we had Row Impact do is do a life cycle assessment of a rack of pipette tips. We used 96 tip format. And we said, what if you never made this thing? What if the factory never cranked it out? What if you never beaded water to injection mold this plastic? What if you never put it in a box? What if you never put it on a ship? What if you never trash the packaging? What if you never put it in the landfill or incinerated it? What if none of that happened and you just used it on site 10 times? So that is the data that we're able to provide our customers as they're evaluating adding a tip washing program. And so we can provide these forecasts for impact. And it's really been transformational, the dialogue with our customers, because we're talking to all kinds of stakeholders there. We're talking to investor relations and stakeholder management. You guys mentioned that. Everybody has a sustainability report, a responsibility report, something like that. So those people care about these projects. You have the procurement people, and there is a huge cost savings by reusing tips. I mean, we see tips ranging from $5 to $80. So just think about that. If you can take that money, save it, think about what you can invest in for your lab, invest in your people, invest in your company. You're not buying plastics. So there's a huge financial savings. And then probably the stakeholder closest, near and dearest to our heart is the scientist or the lab tech or the person that is throwing all this stuff away and is going home at night like, ugh, I don't like this. Our technology kind of gives them this active outlet to practice sustainability and to just sort of let that negative part of their job kind of go away. So, and you're seeing, I mean, everybody knows this, the younger generation of scientists, I mean, they're demanding this. They're not accepting the status quo here. So that's kind of how we appeal to all of the different stakeholders in at our customer site.
What are the kind of hurdles, pushback or resistance that you get when you're discussing reusing tips? Are there any problems you come up against?
Yes. It's a total mindset change. I mean, I mean, Derek, you've been in the lab more, like and I would open up here, like,
Yeah.
from your perspective, even at Mayo, like, what would you have worried about?
I think number one, it's always easier to do nothing. It's easier to do what we've always done, which is throw it away. So until we make it easy enough where it's worth the change or provide enough value, that's the first hurdle we always have to do. We saw it with recycling, just plastic bottles and everything in the world, basically, right? 20, 30 years ago, recycling was relatively not as successful as it is today. Scientists worry about the integrity of their data, right? And at the end of the day, we do a lot of work to prove that the data is equivalent and that it's equivalent to their new tips. And I think proving scientists with data, instead of Derek saying that or Katie saying that we can, but showing them, we wash your tips, you ran your assay, and you got the exact same results on the same samples, that goes a long way. I would also add that labs are extremely resource constrained, right? So finding young scientists to come into the lab and work them. I know, at least in the U.S. specifically, a lot of our healthcare labs are struggling to staff people. So adding additional work like washing tips can be a challenging endeavor to take on, right? It doesn't generate results for your patients or your clinicians. So that's why we're really focusing on automation and how can we make this easy for them.
Yeah, I take your point, but also you don't have to go and reorder your tips, which can be a long process. You don't have to wait for them to arrive. You don't have to chase the delivery because they didn't turn up. You don't have to get the guys from the stores to bring them up for you, unpack them. You're actually saving a lot of time and effort, I would say, by washing the tips up. But just picking up on what you were saying, Katherine, about quantifying this, is it a carbon saving, is it a plastic saving, is it a cost saving, or is it a combination of all three? How do you present this data back to people if they wanted to see, okay, is it worth me buying one of these instruments? How will they get the data back? Yeah,
we translate it into 4 metrics. So if they'll share the cost of their consumable, we'll actually do the cost savings. So cost. We'll do carbon emission, and that carbon emission is that what never happened. So what's how much is being emitted at the factory, at the transport, at the end of life, all of that stuff. And that's the work we did with Row. That is all backed up by a bunch, like a massive spreadsheet of data and forecasting out what the world will look like in 2030. And that was a big data project. And so we're getting the carbon emission reduction from not making the tip. You never did that. So that's what the carbon is. And then The what's very interesting is water. Okay, this is just the world we live in with sustainability. We're washing tips and preventing these plastics being thrown. That's a good. But the people that care about what we're doing also care about all the other things around sustainability. I'm going to have to buy your machine. Like, where do you source your stuff? How much energy does it draw? How much water does it take? I mean, this is the world we live in, where people are conscientious about all the reverberations, and I love it. It holds us really accountable. Actually, our European customers have just really driven a lot of our curiosity, and our data our data discovery that we've done has come out of Europe, because you guys are a little bit further ahead than the US, as you said at the beginning, which I was happy to hear you say that. We're kind of catching up. But so we got to think, so water, I'm sorry, I'm kind of off track here. Cost, carbon, water. So the water used in injection molding, it's a very high intense water process. So what we've done is we've taken what is the water utilization in injection molding minus what is used to wash that rack of tips at the customer site. Now that's scope 3 water versus direct on-site water. So again, you have to filter it through the systems and the way you're reporting, but there is a net water savings. And then finally is we do it in kilograms, so kilograms of plastic. And what we do when we provide the forecast to customers, we'll get their, how many tips do you want to wash? How many times do you think you can wash them? And we'll give them a forecast that shows the carbon emission. And then we'll show that metric with miles driven by a standard car. We'll show our water savings. How X number of hours showering continuously. And so we're showing them real digestible, translating into real digestible pieces of information that are very motivating. So if you're going to change something, or to Derek's point, not do nothing, then at least you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And we found that to be incredibly effective. And we actually, one of our pharmaceutical companies who's very advanced in their sustainability efforts, actually educated us on that, on how important it was to translate this carbon energy to something people can understand, it because it was highly motivating to their workforce. So that was a change we made. But so we'll provide that forecast ahead of time when they're considering implementing tip washing. And then after the fact, once they've been washing for a year, we'll actually provide a report that is third-party certified for this is, our instruments keep track of the wash count. So we will know by the end of the year how many racks went through this. So what was the actual plastic that you diverted? What was the actual carbon emissions that never happened? What was the actual water savings and actual cost savings? And so, like I said, one of the first large customers put it in their report, which we're very excited about. But that's the idea, is to give a lab, once they've made this investment, give them something to talk about and talk to their stakeholders, internal and external.
I think that's fantastic. You can kind of predict those savings to give people the confidence to invest in the instrument, but also follow through and report on it as well, so they have that tangible evidence to say, well, what we did was a good thing, and also we've saved X amount of carbon, water, cost. And great to put it into language we all understand, miles travelled or how many showers. That great metrics to have and understand what an impact people are making. Obviously, it's a fantastic instrument, but I would imagine you're always striving to improve it. What's the sort of most wasteful part of what you do, and what are you trying to do to mitigate that? Is it reducing the energy consumption or the amount of water further? What are you guys doing to try and make your products even better?
I'm going to take this a little bit of a different direction. I think, Derek, you should talk about automation, because I think that's our biggest improvement on that end. On what we're doing to improve it is, so we're in Europe. We have 5 people in Europe, 5 field-based people in Europe, and we have 4 field-based people in the United States. So just that right there is a total shift. This company was started in the United States 10 years ago. Most of our business was in clinical diagnostics in the US 10 years ago. Now we have more people in Europe. So we are responding to the interest out of Europe. And when you're doing that, when you're an American company trying to build a business in Europe, you are flying people over for meetings, flying people over for conferences, shipping equipment over for conferences, obviously shipping product from Richmond, Virginia overseas. And so once we understood this market a little bit better, we were, and our customers in Europe pushed back. Why are you sitting in front of me at this meeting? Could we have done this at Teams? When my instrument has like a preventative maintenance, you're flying someone from the East Coast. Are you kidding me? That is crazy. So they put a lot of pressure on us to commit to Europe. So that's probably the thing we're working on to improve our carbon footprint the most, is building a business in Europe. And so we stood up at GmbH in Mannheim, Germany. We have a demo room there so customers can bring their tips and wash them in our demo room and take them back and test them and get their hands on the equipment. We have application specialists in the UK and in Germany, and so they're able to service the machines, obviously without flying over from the United States. And our next goal is to try to figure out some third-party logistics so that we're shipping our reagent from Europe instead of shipping it from the United States. So like as from my role, that's what I think about, is how do I make all the work our customers are doing in Europe, we don't cancel it out by all this US flying and travel back and forth. So that's more like on the broader business, and Derek, maybe you can talk a little bit about automation.
I think there's a couple of points here. So I mean, like time is one of those things that it's hard to get back, right? So scientists are always busy, always doing a million things. So like that's where automation comes in, right? So when you're manually moving these racks, there's intervention that needs to happen. Like a person needs to load the washer, move the tips from the washer to the dryer, and then out of the dryer, right? And when that scientist has a billion other things they're also trying to accomplish, it was a big wasteful part of our system. Human capital is something. The other thing with tips is that they come in a bazillion different sizes and configurations, right? Whether it's 384, 20 well format, 96 format, different manufacturers have different racks. One thing that we do to kind of mitigate some of the water utilization is like do basins that are appropriately sized for the tips we're washing, right? Smaller basins for smaller tips. So we use less water, and that's one way we mitigate some of that water utilization on smaller tips.
Excellent. So if you could pick one thing, what's the most impactful change that Grenova have implemented as a business, yourselves rather than your obviously your products?
I think we've been a market disruptor. I mean, and huge kudos to our founder. 10 years ago, like people thought he was out of his mind. And we're changing the mindset. We're normalizing reusing plastics. As Derek mentioned, it's kind of funny, like we used to use glass pipettes. Okay. What did we do with glass pipettes?
Reuse them.
Yeah.
Wash them. Then it was like, okay, well, plastic is better, and obviously the breakage and the whatever, and you could produce more. So we moved to plastics. So when that change was happening, I'm sure the scientists were like, oh, glass to plastics, you're going to affect, the plastics will leach, and oh my gosh, you'll affect my results. And then the plastic people had to somehow convince all these scientists, no, you can use plastics. Okay, change made. Now we've got plastics that were good enough to replace glass. We used to wash glass. So now what we're trying to do is you can wash plastics. And so I think our biggest contribution to this story is challenging the mindset and the narrative. And you had asked a question earlier about like pushback from scientists. One of the most impactful things I did, I went over to Basel, Switzerland, and one of our customers there was doing a demonstration in his lab. He had one of our units. He was doing a demonstration for 7 other scientists at this company. And he told me, he's like, just sit in the back. I don't want you to talk. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this demo. I just want you to observe this. And it was this great demo because so he had these 7 scientists there. He had 2 huge cases of tips, and he goes, "This is the number of tips I would go through every week." And it was like this visual, these 2 huge boxes. And he goes, "Since I implemented Grenova, I keep a half a box on site, so my spacing's gotten better." And he had saved at that point in time 14,000 Swiss francs in like a 3-month period. And he used just the mini, the Tip Novus Mini, the single rack at a time. So he's doing this demo and he's talking about this, kind of setting it up, and it's, you know, and then he's going through how to use it. And I swear, with the 7 scientists, I would say 3 were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Oh my gosh, like, I didn't know this existed. We need to do this. Tell me how you're doing. How did you do the validation? 3 of them were kind of like, oh. And then one of them was like, no way! Did you get approval for this? Oh my gosh, no. I would never, no. And I really realized at that meeting, observing this, that like we're at the part of this where there's some people that are going to be interested in helping us figure this out. And we're going to figure it out with them. And there's going to be some people who this is just like so mind-blowing that like it's going to take them 200 hours to convince them. And then there's some people who are just kind of like, meh. We're going to spend time with the people who want to make the change and who are willing to help us work through all these pushback, who are willing to talk about us, get on a conference and say, we're doing this successfully. Here's how we've implemented it. This is how it's integrated into our strategy. And so I still think, you know, the question was like, what's the biggest change you've made? We're challenging the mindset. That's the biggest change that we've made. But there's some people that are willing to take the challenge. There's some universities that have really stepped up. Derek actually has a great customer. You want to talk a little bit about U of M?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working with University of Michigan. We have a couple of units placed with them. One of the things that really excited us about this is that they actually have a natural history museum. Right, so we partnered with them, got them a system into their facility. This happened in about March of this year, but they actually created a sustainability plaque that they're showing in the museum. So kids, people, you know, everybody on holiday that's going to the university to walk through this natural history museum will see how much plastic they're saving. It's just like one of those really cool things. And the things we're looking at are like young scientists, right? The 7-year-olds that are walking through this museum, they're going to see this and know that we don't have to use this plastic. And when they get to university 10 years from now, maybe they're going to come up with the next greatest invention in sustainability that we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah, and years from now, you're going to have scientists saying, "What, you used to throw all these in the bin?"
Yeah.
That's going to be the aim, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
That's right.
anecdotally, what's kind of funny is that when Grenova came out, I worked at Hamilton Robotics, right? So I was programming liquid handlers, and my personal opinion on it was like, no scientist is going to wash our tips. Like, I believe that this was crazy. So like when Katie said, when Ali had the idea 10 years ago, I was one of the people programming liquid handlers in labs across the country, every industry. I did not see it. I did not see the vision for it. 10 years later, now I'm working here, and I believe in it, and I know it can work. So I mean, like, it's about proving and showing people that it can work and just changing that mindset. And a lot has changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So if either of you could go back, knowing what you know now, to speak to the creator of the company 10 years ago, what would you tell them to try and fast track this? Would it be hunt down those champions, Katie, that you spoke about, you know, people that really get excited when you talk about it? Or would you go and speak to the Dereks of the world and try and convince them and get some really tough converts? What would you tell them if you could?
To me, I think focusing on getting high quality data right away and publications, so building up the scientific literature around it from the start. That's one of the big focus we've been on, is getting good publications, getting people to talk about it. But as we would have 10 years ago gotten those early wins, right? Getting data to support what we're doing and quantifying it. So focusing on the numbers, like getting ahead of that curve of reporting. Those are the two things I would have really focused on 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost like an unfair question to even say. It's just, you know, when you're starting a company back then, it's just, you know, you're living hand to mouth, you're spending all your money on R&D. And so, but really what I think the biggest learning was from my 2 years here is, and I don't know if it's just the after COVID effect of just not being as many people in the labs, there's just not as much staff. And I think this is a global issue. I mean, I think Europe and US have dealt with that after COVID. But I think we should have gotten to automation faster. because we went through this huge period of time where people invested in the systems, and then it was like, oh, well, now we don't have anybody to run it, or oh, so and so ran it and she's left and on maternity, and so no one's running it while she's out. I think once people buy into the idea, we should have made it easier, faster to use 5 years ago. But again, it's expensive to develop our automation, and so like we're making that investment now. But I do think if we would have automated it sooner, we would have had really. It's really not about adoption; it's about actually the impact, like just really making the impact and getting this plastics out. So these automation platforms that we're putting in are doing. I mean, the one we're about to install. I mean, that thing's going to do 70 racks a day. 70 a day, just in the background. And that's where we're going to just really make an impact.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID there, Catherine. I was selling pipette tips during COVID. And, I could have sold the stock that we had a million times over. What labs would have done to have one of your instruments at that time? That was a great opportunity, I would have thought, to change some mindsets of some big companies who were desperate for pipette tips and just couldn't get them. So did you see a lot of success during that period of people almost reluctantly, adopting it because they had no other choice?
No, we're standing on the shoulders of what happened during COVID, because that's exactly what happened. People were like panicked. You can wash tips, get me one. This is where we got some of our larger customers during this period of time and produced some of that data. And so, so the one thing, like some people that bought it just for supply, that's the only reason they bought it. There was no sustainability motivation. Maybe they didn't use it after. But a lot of those people that bought it for COVID but saw the sustainability benefits, very often saw the cost savings, they're not going back. I mean, that operational cost savings is huge. It's built into their budgets now. So COVID was a huge blessing to our business. And I would say, the COVID wins came and it was all about supply. But then right when that kind of ended is really, I feel like, when sustainability became like business imperative level, instead of just, those people over there care about it. Now it's like you got the business people, the board of directors talking about it, the CEOs talking about it. It's become much more normalized in business. And so COVID was we're enormously grateful for COVID. It was a huge part of our story.
Yeah, I think we all saw a huge increase in the amount of plastic being used because the amount of diagnostic testing is being done, but also people at home were doing lateral flows and binning those, and there was just so much waste generated during COVID that I think you're right, it wasn't just about securing people's supply, it was also, oh my God, look what we're binning, we need to do something about this problem now as well. So yeah, double whammy of benefits really from COVID, of people taking a bit more responsibility for the supply of their products and the reuse of them, but also what's going in the bin as a result of that. So yeah, I'm
kind of just, since I know that you guys sold tips and plates, like something we talk about is, especially with the recent tariff discussion we've all been having, is we do wonder, like, are labs still, I'm going to ask you a question on your own podcast. What do you think? Like, do you think labs still have that residual panic from the supply chain shortage, and do you think they still think about that?
I've been quite surprised how short sort of some people's memories have been about that time. I've seen people swear blind they would never go back to a certain supplier because they were let down so badly and their stock was prioritised to someone else, and then gradually people have just drifted back to ordering hand to mouth and from the same supplier. And so some people have got have remembered the pain and don't want to revisit, and they've stocked up and they've got better sort of security on their supply chain and they've got a trusted supplier. Others have just gone, as Derek said earlier, gone back to what's easy and just gone, okay, I'll just carry on ordering those tips from where I used to get them from. So it's a real mix, and I guess it's probably down, you're 7 people, of those 7 you saw 3 excited by Grenova. It's probably the same percentage. It's probably 3 people have sort of really focused on making sure their supply is good. 3 have probably just kind of gone with the flow, and then 1's gone right back to what they were doing before. So similar percentages, I would say.
Probably a question for you, Derek, more than Catherine. Do you think labs can get close to carbon neutral? I suppose you could extend it to the OR as well if you wanted to, Catherine, but lab specifically, do you think it's ever possible?
I do. So I'm a climate optimist. So yes, I think we can get there. So like if you look 50 years ago and the way we did science back then and how much has changed to where we are now, what's 50 years from now going to look like? We don't know. So I mean, like if we're optimistic and invest in the technology, I definitely think it's possible that we can get to a carbon neutral state in labs. It just might not look like labs look today.
Yeah, I've gone totally 180 on this. So when we first started doing this podcast, I thought, absolutely not. There's no chance people want things sterile. They want to throw it away because it's got virus and they want to burn it. But having spoken, and it's actually 3 US-based companies that I've spoken to, or we've spoken to on this podcast, that have really made my complete change in mindset. Is Greg Quack from Diversified Biotech, who produce their planet-safe plant-based consumables. It's you guys who can now wash those consumables, so they're plant-based to start. Then you guys can wash them 20, 30 times and reuse them. And then Polycarbon, or here in the UK, Recycle Lab, can then recycle that plastic as well. So we're not at odds with each other here. There's solutions that can all be combined to make potentially carbon neutrality, I would say. Catherine, I don't know if you have a take on that.
No, I totally agree. Like what's interesting about sustainability is I've watched major pharmaceuticals collaborate on this topic who would never, share information. And so I think I feel very strongly about, we're not competing with anyone here. Like there's plenty of plastic for everybody. So you've got, we have a great relationship with Polycarbon, and we've started doing some stuff in market together and really painting that picture of like, can you imagine if you bought tips that we made from recycled plastics, you washed it 10 times, and then we recycle it. And could you imagine if we closed the cycle on that? And then not to mention just what we're doing kind of on the back end, but I have to just tip my hat to manufacturers who are reducing their plastic in their tip boxes, who are coming out with innovations on better tips, bio-based tips. You're seeing one of our customers is actually working. It's a lab out in Colorado. They're trying to develop the new plastic that can biodegrade. You have like the Echo from Beckman, doing acoustic transfer of. I mean, it's all great. We all should be cheering each other on. We're all part of the system. So it's funny. Like if I could redo what is sustainability? It's innovation, and I think in this space, there's a lot of people that are very depressed, and I understand that. Like I can actually go down the rabbit hole. I do that when it's like hot in I live in Texas and all the air conditioners are running. I kind of get like a sustainability like panic attack. And it's the outlet for panic and doom and gloom is innovation and do something. That is the antidote for this. And so I think it's exciting. I would say like if I could revise what is sustainability? Sustainability should be innovation. That's what people should think when they hear that word.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Derek, can I just pick up something you said earlier about the quality of the tip is dependent on how many times you can wash it. So is there an argument for customers who have maybe switched to generics because they were cheaper and they could buy more of them, to back to the manufacturers, the Hamiltons of the world, the Gilson, the Eppendorf, and buy maybe a more costly pipette tip that's actually going to be able to wash more times?
The way I look at this question is largely you wash a tip one time and you reuse it one time, you're cutting your plastic in half and your costs in half. If you wash it 10 times, you're at 80%. If you're up to 20, that's 95%. 50% less plastics in a lab, still significant in my mind. You know what I mean? 80%'s better, 90's great, right? That's, about all we can really ask for. It's going to be a balance, right? So the different types of tips are going to have different plastics in them, and their overall impact might be different. So I think we'd have to really deep dive into that a little bit. So is there less plastic in the cheaper tip versus the more high quality tip from the other manufacturer? And I don't have that information, so I can't really say yes or no. But I think focusing on even doing it once is significant.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Katie, maybe? I don't know.
I think, just to understand the question better, I think you're saying that if you say you want to use this tip, but it's too expensive, so you're kind of like settling for this other tip. Does Grenova help you use the tip you want to use and make the cost? I mean, I say yes. I think that's what we've had a lot of fun with this. We have a cost of ownership model that we're doing with customers, and it's taking into account everything: power, water. Like it's very. The guy who built it, I said, "You're going too deep," and I was wrong, and he was right, because people like it's so thorough that people really appreciate it. But I do think, one of the things people always think is the sustainability is going to cost me all this money. I think that's what's very interesting about Grenova is it's actually a cost savings. Like even when you look at buying our equipment, we often see less than 1 year return on the investment for the capital equipment, and then you're getting the sustainability all the time. And then at some point in the process, it flips, and now this is all operational. Well, it is always operational savings, but you've paid back your capital investment oftentimes in about a year. And so I do think people can use the money they used to spend on single-use tips to do other things. And if they want to move to a different tip, they can do it there. If they want to buy a new machine, they can do it. They can use that money to do it there. It's freeing up operational dollars to do more science, or do science the way you want to do science.
And just to put a scale to some of these numbers, just so you guys know, I mean, these are 7 figures in some use cases. High throughput specialty tips, like it can be a significant amount of money savings over 5 years, like millions of dollars. And you can buy a lot of instrumentation. You can innovate a lot of science with an extra $1 million over 5 years.
Yeah. And you can put other sustainable initiatives in as well. You could finance recycling there. You can buy
Correct.
other instruments. I think you're absolutely right, Derek. A lot of the customers we speak to just don't have a budget to be sustainable. But if your instrument can free that budget up for them, then they can do what they want with that money, because it's already allocated, it's already spent really on tips. The fact that you're saving it to spend it on anything else is brilliant. And that leads us to one of our kind of consistent questions that we always ask is, do you think sustainability is worth paying for, paying extra? And I know your instrument, you're not asking customers to do that, you're actually going to save them money. But if that wasn't the case, do you still think it's worth paying for?
Yes. I mean, for me, I have kids at home, so I mean, like, to me, if we don't do something needs to change. So I mean, I would look towards driving that price down, but we only have one world. And once it's gone, it's gone. Or once the resources are gone, it's gone. So at some point, there's almost a responsibility, as Katie mentioned earlier, to do something.
I think it is worth paying for, but I think labs need to hold vendors like us accountable to helping make a business case. Because if it's all just about emotion, we're not going to get that far. But if we can figure out what is the value proposition for our customers and how is this sustainable technology impacting either their corporate brand, their, what we do, the operational cost savings, what partnership could you create? Like, I think the labs need to hold us accountable to being business people as well. So I think it's more lasting that way.
Yeah. I think combining, as we said earlier, combining things together works beautifully, because you could say to a customer, I'm going to save you X amount on your tips, which means you can buy plant-based or recycled tips now. You can afford to pay a bit more for a more sustainable element. So it's really important to have products like yours on the market that do offer this cost saving, which can help supplement the ones that don't currently, because there's no economy of scale. Greg was very open with us about these plant-based plastics. They are a little bit more expensive. So if we can save money on washing our tips, maybe we could buy his plastics that are made of plant-based materials. So yeah, I would agree it's worth paying for, but it doesn't necessarily have to come out of your budget. It can be found elsewhere with Grenova or other sustainable options that save money.
What can we expect from the future of Grenova? Are there anything else that you're kind of working on? Any more advances?
Automation, lots of automation. I'm so excited about what automation can do for this problem. It's the answer to making it easy, part of the ecosystem, we've obviously hired Derek. We have another automation engineer in Richmond, and there's just so many possibilities. And actually, the automation space is interesting because there's so many really cool people doing really cool things, and you can kind of put all the puzzle pieces together. So we kind of talk about it a little bit like lab Legos. Like, we want to have a bunch of different configurations for people based on what they're doing, or what their lab looks like, or what their workflow is, or how their lab comes together. So I just think about, like, could mobile robots one day be going to all the different labs and picking up all the tips and bringing it to a central raw station? So I am really bullish on automation to make it easy. And then we are going to figure out how to automate plates. Right now we can do tips automated, but our plate washer is still manual. So that's on our R&D roadmap for 2026. But there's a lot of interest in plates, and kind of surprisingly, it seems like people are a little more willing to wash plates than tips, just overall. There's not as many plates as tips. There's much more tips in the market, but there's a lot of excitement from customers, but they want this thing automated. So that's our challenge. That's our immediate challenge, is figuring out how to do that.
You've picked tips, which is a huge amount of plastic in the market. Plates is obviously a natural second. Is there any other products that you would think you could potentially wash in the future? Physiological pets, tissue culture plastics. Is there any scope for that, or is it just too difficult because of what's being grown inside them and things?
Yeah, we've had customers come to us asking us to do custom builds for, like, pins, for example, the comb washer. And we're nimble enough and small enough, we can do those projects. It's all just about resourcing and timing of our engineers' time. But yeah, we can. Our technology is about manifolds coming down over a lumen. There is a lot of possibilities. It's just, you got to be careful when you're small, because you got to really make sure that we're doing tips really well. Then we're going to move to plates and do that really well. But yes, to answer your question, there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, brilliant. I suppose there's a lot of tips to go after before you start moving on to anything else. Huge problem to tackle. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Is there anyone else you'd recommend to come on the podcast? Anyone else you're talking to about sustainability you think that our listeners would want to hear about?
Well, okay, so we have an awesome partner. We met. Have you heard of ChemiShield?
Yeah.
Okay. We partner. They track hazardous waste around the lab. So it's kind of a safety. When you think of, like, ESG, it's kind of on that safety, people safe space. And one thing that was really cool is the software that they use to track all these chemicals around the lab was very similar to the software we needed to track tips around the lab. How many times have you washed it? Where is it? And so we actually partnered with ChemiShield and built off their platform to create our tip tracking solution that we're actually launching in Q3 of this year. So again, as we get, I guess maybe I should say that's what's coming. So as we start doing this on an automated, wide-scale fashion, you're going to need a really good tracking mechanism. And so we're getting into the software environment from that perspective. But he, to me, has a fantastic story, and very similar. He was a lab scientist and saw this problem like our founder and was like, we can fix this problem. We can solve this. So he's got just a great founder mindset, tons of energy. And I love that he was open to letting us use his platform to base off of. And so I think he would be somebody great to talk to. Row Impact, the people that did our calculator, I think they would be fascinating to talk to. I think they have a little bit of a broader scale, kind of like in the energy sector, but they're really knowledgeable about the sustainability reporting and the imperatives around that. Very knowledgeable about Europe as well. So I think they would be an interesting guest for you too, if you wanted to get nerdy about the data.
Brilliant. Thank you. Can I just slot a question in, which going back to your point, Derek, about inspiring scientists of the future with your Natural History Museum. Is there any scope for using your instruments in teaching laboratories so students get used to actually reusing plastics at a very early stage in their career?
No, 100%. So one of the things we're really looking at strategic academic accounts like universities, like University of Michigan, where we can really start piloting, changing the mindset at the university level too, right? So teaching labs, central wash, like the part of that program is that all the teaching labs are going to be washing their tips, right? So the general biology courses, the general chemistry courses. So if you introduce sustainability at an academic level at a university, when they go to work at like the Mercks, the Pfizers, or the pharma companies of the world, right, they're going to have this mindset, well, why can't we wash tips? We did it at university, running the same qPCR reaction that we're doing here, or the same discovery type assay, or the same protein work. It's just going to translate well. So, 5-10 years from now, that whole mindset about washing plastics is going to be changed.
Brilliant. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, we actually have we have a customer in the U.S., Georgia Tech, a university. They have created a program. They call it the Tip Cycle Program, and they have a core lab, and they actually go collect tips from all around the university and wash it at the core lab. And they've had this program going about 10 years. We've been washing tips about 5 years. We've been washing tips with them a long time. They're just now getting in, we're working through the plates right now. But that's a really interesting model of a university implementing it for all the cost reasons, sustainability reasons, but also, exposure to it. They would maybe be, I don't know if they'd do it, but they would potentially be a very interesting guest to talk about their program.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really like the idea of a central service. You have it for genomic sequencing, for HPLC, other, expensive equipment that each lab don't want to buy themselves, and they go to a central service. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but here at most universities, they'll have a core facility that does these things for scientists. Why not have a tip washing station there as well? People can go and wash their tips there as well. It seems like a bit of a missed opportunity for most universities. Katherine, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely fascinating answers to our questions, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of that. Just before we go, just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors, Lampadina Group, for providing us and the premises.
Didn't supply any donuts today, no?
No donuts today, no.
Thank you, Katherine, Derek. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. As always, subscribe if you aren't bored of us yet and want to listen to another one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the work you guys are doing in this space.
Thank you very much.
Science and healthcare.